Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this roundtable. It's about Wi-Fi spectrum in Europe and what's next for 6 gigahertz. This is an interesting topic, and today I will have, and this roundtable is sponsored by the Wi-Fi Alliance, and today we have Alex Roydblatt, who is the Vice President of Worldwide Regulatory Affairs at the Wi-Fi Alliance, Ian Buis, the VP of Business Development at LANCOM, Chris Szymanski, Director of Product Marketing and Government Affairs at Broadcom, and our special guest is Andreas Geiss, the head of the unit for radio spectrum in DG Connect as part of the European Commission. So this is a great opportunity to talk about what's coming in terms of, from a regulatory point of view in Europe. And this is a great time to do so. We have recently 6 gigahertz has become available in US and the UK. And we just heard I think yesterday or a couple of days ago, that South Korea is also releasing the 6 gigahertz for unlicensed use. So with all that, we will have a discussion with Andreas and the other panelists. And as we do that, please do submit your questions in the Q&A. There is a bottom, there is a window you can open. And please do write your Q&A as we go along. And so that we will have a chance to address at least some of them at the end, towards the end of the roundtable. Also, keep in mind that although it's much more exciting to watch this live, you will still also be able to watch it offline, and we will send you information on how to do so. What else? I think we are ready to go, but I would like to first introduce you, Alex. Alex Royblatt is as I said, the Vice President of Worldwide Regulatory Affairs at the Wi-Fi Alliance, and he has the great job of looking at the organization overall regulatory strategy. And these days, this is a very important role with all the 6 gigahertz development, and he's been working towards the development of regulatory objectives and also on advocacy for the implementation of these objectives with governments, regulators, international organizations, and sometimes with the crowd, like he's doing today. So Alex, let me just hand over to you for a great discussion. And again, all of you in the audience, feel free to send questions in the Q&A. Alex, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Monica. So having been in a lockdown for the last six months, I can honestly say that this is a real highlight to interact with all of you, even though it's just virtual. I hope that someday soon we'll get together in person, but in the meantime, let's just stay healthy. So with that, let me introduce our special guest and also my partners. So for the special guest today, we have Andreas Geiss. He's the head of the European Commission DG Connect unit for radio spectrum policy. So as you can all understand, Andreas has the leading role in developing the spectrum policy for the European Commission. And he also leads the Commission's Radio Spectrum Committee. I also have two partners for today's session, and I'm lucky for that. First, I have Jan Buis from LANCOM. He's the Vice President of Business Development at LANCOM Systems. And LANCOM, for those who don't know, is the leading European manufacturer of network solutions. And among other responsibilities that Jan has, he leads LANCOM's regulatory and public affairs engagement. And then you all know Chris, but I'll I can't skip introducing him. I'd like to do that. So Christopher Szymanski, he is a director of product marketing and government affairs at Broadcom as mobile connectivity division. He is involved in, among many other things, regulatory affairs and standards development. And Chris also serves on the board of Wi-Fi Alliance and actually the board's regulatory advisor. So I think we are going to have a great session today. So maybe to begin, we'll start with Jan. As the leading wireless LAN provider in Europe, I know that LANCOM interacts with the European Commission on many different levels. But Jan, what is your perspective specifically on spectrum issues?
Okay, first of all, thanks Alex for the introduction and thank you all for being here. And before going into the detail, I really like to thank Andreas and Andreas' team for all the leadership they have done the past period of time to bring us as an industry, but also all the nations together and work towards the result we have today. And that was not an easy road, and I think still there are a couple of roadblocks to come. But it's so important that that you and your team are there and bringing us together. So for us, that already is a big thank from my side point of view. Which brings also a little bit in my direction of my question, and for that I need a small introduction. And the introduction is related to the past. So when I joined the Wi-Fi industry 20 years ago, in Europe in particular, we were just in a lucky position that we had very strange things in the ISM 2.4 gigahertz band and harmonize those things. And I always like to take the example of France taking 4 channels, Belgium not allowing to beam across the road, or in Italy you actually had to pay a registration fee to use license exempt frequencies. These times are over. But when we moved over to the 5 gigahertz, we quickly learned that there are incumbent users. And with these incumbent users, we also have our challenges, even today. And knowing that the EC only represents a small part of the whole community, which makes a decision because only the member states, then my drive being a European is how can we strive for efficient use of spectrum, and particularly with the 6 gigahertz to come. And therefore, my question is twofold. Andreas, can you help us all to bring forward what the role is of the European Commission in this whole spectrum management, but also how to facilitate, again, the harmonization that we need only for Europe, not only for Europe, but also for the world. And that is my real big questions to you.
Andreas, you're muted. There you go.
Yes, okay, thank you. I was just going to unmute myself. Thank you. So I, first of all, would like to thank Alex and also Jan for the kind words. And I'm very happy to be here with you today and to take part in this event. And in terms of the question, let me get right into the middle of things. I think that, you know, the role of the European Commission is basically a coordinating role. And you have to think of it in a way that we have 27 EU member states which have a wide range of competencies in spectrum management. First and foremost, the assignment of spectrum, and also the specific licensing at the national level. However, let's say an important pillar of the European Union is the single market. That means the free movement of goods, services, and people. And this pillar is something that is very prominent, let's say, in the EU, and it means that the European Commission harmonizes technical conditions of spectrum use in a binding way. It can do that, and the member states have to then apply these conditions at national level. So that's a very important role in the sense of avoiding fragmentation across Europe, creating economies of scale for equipment, And we have two specific things in place there that we can do. We have the process of adopting Commission decisions on spectrum, which are legally binding to the member states. For example, we have a decision on the 5 gigahertz RLAN band. And what we do is for the developing the technical criteria that are contained in these Commission decisions, the Commission has a close cooperation with the CEPT, which is also administrations working in Europe together, and it gives mandates to them in order to develop these technical criteria. And based on that, we can then make a legal basis in the radio spectrum committee, which I also chair. So this is one element, this process that we have of making binding Commission decisions. The other element and the role that we take is that we work in close cooperation with the standardization bodies. The Radio Equipment Directive is an important directive in this context, and it contains essential requirements that must be met by all radio equipment. And so the most popular way of meeting these requirements is through the development of so-called harmonized standards. And such harmonized standards, they give the presumption of conformity with the essential requirements in Europe. And so all the manufacturer has to do is to declare that he's compliant with a certain harmonized standard, and then he can place his equipment on the market, on the European market. And so for this process, the Commission cooperates closely with the European Telecommunication Standards Institute. And finally, it's worth noting that we also have a so-called electronic communications code, and that inter alia contains a framework for the objectives and the processes that member states must follow when they assign the spectrum. And that is already in force, but member states have to transpose it by the 21st of December of this year. So it may all sound a little bit complicated, but that's because there's 27 member states, and we have to make sure that we coordinate these things across Europe in order to get a common line and unfragmented use within the internal market of these different types of spectrum uses.
But it implies that the CEPT is much more than only the EC member states. So that makes it even challenging to work with the other, I believe it's 48 countries, the whole CEPT.
That's correct. We work very closely and well together with the CEPT because they develop what we call CEPT reports, and they are sort of the basis which we use then in order to develop the decisions. And they also go through a public consultation process with their reports where everyone, a stakeholder, can be involved. So that means while the Radio Spectrum Committee is only limited to the participation of the member states, what is being discussed in that committee has actually already gone through a whole process of consultation with stakeholders.
Thank you, Andreas. You helped me a lot.
Thanks. That was a very helpful discussion. Andreas, I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and instead of talking about the regulatory processes, let's talk about the situation we're in today, which is, of course, predominated by this COVID pandemic. So the reports we're seeing from Europe and elsewhere indicate a significant increase in demand for Wi-Fi connectivity. And it's not surprising given that lockdown resulted in a dramatic decrease in carrier mobile use as people stopped commuting and instead are working from home, typically on Wi-Fi. So we're seeing spikes in the number of active Wi-Fi devices, in the volume of data and voice traffic carried over Wi-Fi. And interestingly, also a significant spike, over 100% increase in upstream traffic, given that there's all this video conferencing as we're doing right now, and file sharing and other uses. I should also note that in light of strain of this lockdown is putting on a telecom infrastructure, the European Commission recommended connecting to Wi-Fi to relieve the stress on the mobile network. So it's certainly great that the Wi-Fi is being recognized as a robust and integral component of the telecom infrastructure, but it's the spectrum availability for Wi-Fi remains limited, and reports indicate that almost twofold increase in measurable Wi-Fi coverage issues in residential settings. So I think that there is that degradation in performance as a result of this higher demand. So recognizing that even post-pandemic, this is likely to be a new normal where we will require increased wireless connectivity. What are the steps the European Commission is considering in addressing the surging demand for Wi-Fi?
Thanks for that question, Alex. I mean, certainly, I mean, this whole pandemic is an accelerator. I mean, you mentioned it. We're teleworking, telelearning, teleshopping, what you name it. I mean, it's really, we certainly recognize radio LANs and I mean, Wi-Fi in particular as an important connectivity infrastructure. And we see it as largely complementary to the mobile internet services provided over the mobile network. And I mean, we have recognized this not only since the crisis, and that's why I just like to say we have also been taking steps before the crisis, which are of course now even more important in order to follow through. And I mean, of course, 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz spectrum has been around for a long time for the radio LANs. And about 5 years ago, we investigated an extension of the 5 gigahertz band into neighboring parts of that were not covered in 5 gigahertz. But actually, we dropped that extension at the time because there were concerns over coexistence with other important use, including safety services. Now, before I continue on the spectrum angle, just to clarify that we made a communication in 2016 on the gigabit society. And there we say that in order to meet future broadband connectivity needs, the Commission proposes that by 2025, all schools, transport hubs, and main providers of public services, as well as digitally intensive enterprises, should have access to internet connections with upload speeds of 1 gigabit per second. And in addition, you know, European households, rural, urban, should have access to networks offering the download speed of at least 100 megabit per second, which can be upgraded to 1 gigabit. So we clearly have this goal politically, policy-wise, to really make a difference here. And we have also launched in 2018, and I saw that Monica passed around the links just while we were talking. We had this Wi-Fi for EU project, which is actually a project of distributing vouchers to municipalities and worth 15,000 euros per voucher to municipalities. And it has had a huge success. I mean, since 2018, we've had several calls for these vouchers. We've distributed something like 8,900 vouchers, a total budget of 130 million euro to local municipalities so that they could also have increased Wi-Fi connectivity. And I mean, these things have really moved and also hopefully have helped a little bit also in schools and other places now when we had the pandemic, that they could actually easily then go over to, let's say, the new situation, because they had already had a little bit of experience, let's say, with this new opportunities that you have in the digital classroom. So those, I think, for further information, have a look at the links that I passed. Now, coming back to spectrum, since 2018, we gave a mandate to the CEPT to study and develop technical conditions in the 6 gigahertz band, in the lower 6 gigahertz band. That means 5,925 to 6,425 megahertz. And actually, while we were, we stopped the work on 5 gigahertz expansion, this work now on 6 gigahertz looks much more promising. We have some technical issues which still need to be dealt with and resolved in order to ensure coexistence with existing services. But in the end, the next step that we see on the horizon is going to be a commission decision harmonizing the band, the lower 6 gigahertz band that I've just mentioned. And we will be discussing a draft text with the member states at our next meeting of the Radio Spectrum Committee in December. So that's the concrete next step that I can say that we're taking here.
Thank you, Andreas. And I know that matching the demand to spectrum availability is always a big challenge for regulators. Do you have any projection on when, and I understand this would just be a projection, but when do you think the European Commission may adopt the decision on the 6 gigahertz?
Okay, I mean, this comes a little bit to whether CPT finishes its work. I mean, there was a slight delay in CPT. Right. Due to also the difficulties in dealing with online meetings. I mean, let's face it, I think everyone has had a challenge the last half year in trying to make things work. And you know how it is when you get to the tough discussions, the coffee breaks are sometimes useful, or the huddles, which are not here anymore at the moment. So they hopefully will finish their work in November, which means we will then look at it in December. Hopefully, we can then quickly come to a decision at our meeting in March. And that would mean if everything goes well, hopefully we can have an adopted decision in April next year.
Okay, well, hopefully everything will go well, and the spectrum will become available in early next year. So with that, let's go to Chris. So Chris, as a global manufacturer, Broadcom, which Broadcom is, your role is to engage with regulators around the world, not just in Europe. But from your perspective, what is the European Commission effort to support Wi-Fi connectivity? How does that compare to other areas, and where do you see the challenges are?
Thanks, Alex, for the question. So first of all, I want to thank Andreas for joining us, and thanks for inviting me to participate. The European market is very, very interesting because we have such an opportunity to attack a huge portion of the global market. So, with the European Commission, as Andreas said, covering really a harmonized approach to the market for 27 member states. You have adherence, and then of course we have the CEPT that's 48 countries. So the addressable market here is 700 plus million people, and so having harmonized conditions allows companies like Broadcom to approach that market with some scale, which is very, very helpful in addressing European consumers at lower costs, provisioning broadband service. So it's been very interesting to participate in the European process because you have very distinct views, whether it's those European EU members, or we're talking about the broader CEPT, and trying to make progress on some of these big issues with all of these diverse views can be challenging. But what's been heartening is that we are making progress. The European Commission started with this mandate, and now I guess we're 3 years down the road nearly, and we're pretty close, as Andreas has said, to a harmonized condition, hopefully first half of next year, which is incredibly important to companies like Broadcom, who are engaged in research and development, and it can take 3, 4, 5 years from the beginning of a standard to completion and rolling out products. So the timing is ripe. The timing is ripe, Andreas. I hope that we're able to hit that timeline. I think Wi-Fi 6E, I expect to see a certification program before then, as Wi-Fi Alliance has announced Wi-Fi 6E. Is Wi-Fi 6 extended into the 6 gigahertz band? We've seen the US moving and Korea moving. And so there's a market, and hopefully Wi-Fi Alliance members and the broader Wi-Fi community will have an opportunity to market their product in the US and Europe and Korea and all these other countries. So timing is very, very important, but I'm heartened at the progress that's been made. I have a question for you, Andreas, if I could, that might be something that some of our member companies are very, very interested in. It's a little bit different topic, and it's really how the Commission views Wi-Fi's role in 5G. 5G is an interesting term. Some people apply it as, the radio access technology from 3GPP. Other people look at it more broadly, and they think about the types of services that should be enabled and delivered. I'm interested in understanding how you see 5G and how we should be thinking about Wi-Fi's role in 5G.
So thanks a lot, Chris, for that question. Let me start by saying, and I think we already mentioned it earlier, there is this close connection for me between 5G and Wi-Fi, and that is also because there's the importance of offloading traffic from mobile networks to Wi-Fi, especially when we're in the indoor environment. And we know that there's a lot of traffic, actually, something like 75%, I think I've read, that's actually being offloaded. So the Wi-Fi element here is very, very important. And we see an interplay between Wi-Fi and 5G in the sense that they're continued complementary as technological pillars with, let's say, what I would call a growing trend to a seamless and integrated service provision. So, think about seamless voice over IP or data services on the smartphone, switching between the 5G and the Wi-Fi pipe, depending on where you are. Or, this is something that I think, and I hope will become more frequent in the future. And also we have, of course, with 5G, we address these new business cases, as we say, the verticals. So it's not just your, let's say, usual mobile network operators, but really a lot of new players which are also interested in industrial manufacturing, for example. And they could be relying on Wi-Fi technology in short-range indoor environments, and then that could be complemented through long-range and outdoor with 5G and R. So I think there's really this close coming together, and also maybe what I would call a bit of a healthy competition in terms of the performance between Wi-Fi, which you mentioned version 6, and maybe even going now towards 7, compared to the cellular 4G, 5G. And I hope that this, in terms of services, will become more and more integrated. So that would be my take on that one.
Thank you, Andreas, for that comprehensive answer. And I think that aligns with how I view the world as well. And interestingly, you mentioned, Wi-Fi 6 and then Wi-Fi 7. And so one of the major value propositions as we talk about Wi-Fi addressing new verticals is wider bandwidth. And that's what makes the 6 gigahertz band so appealing. The industry has been marching towards 160 megahertz channels. And, with the 6 gigahertz band, that's going to make many available. As we march towards Wi-Fi 7, the industry is going to be advancing to 320 megahertz channels. So it kind of poses my next question. Not to get greedy, but we're close to harmonization with a lower 6 gigahertz band. Could you give us a pathway? How would we approach, addressing the upper 6 gigahertz band? I recall that originally the Commission was recommending the study of the entire band, but there were some fixed links in the 2 gigahertz range that had not been relocated. And so it was very difficult to study, the upper part of the band. Do you see a pathway for considering the upper part of the band, and how should we be thinking about this as we march towards Wi-Fi 7 and 320 megahertz channels? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Chris. I have to say, when we set out, as you said, in the mandate, which now only covers the lower 6 gigahertz band, we actually had a discussion for the whole 6 gigahertz band already at that time with the member states, because we were thinking of actually studying, not necessarily developing the technical criteria, but at least studying the whole 6 gigahertz band for this type of use. That was back in 2018. Now, already at that time, there was a certain concern of some of the member states. Why? Because there was let's say, experience they had with 5 gigahertz RLAN, where there were some problems with interference into the weather radars, which are also using that band. And although the harmonized standards and the technical criteria that we were using were all fully correct and should have dealt with any sort of harmful interference through the respective functionality, apparently there were some black sheep, but also use cases which made it easy to disable certain mitigation techniques. So the dynamic frequency selection I'm talking about in specific. And this did cause quite some problems, and we're still dealing with that problem right now. And it's the fact that we had this issue that some member states said, look, okay, we're open for 6 gigahertz, but we want a proof of concept. We want to understand that this works first. So let's do this in the lower 6 gigahertz band. Let's see whether it's feasible. And we now know pretty much it is feasible. We're working on it, as I explained earlier. And then put this into practice. And then we will see, because we have some other elements that we need to take into account. The upper 6 gigahertz band is used also for the fixed service. It's used for fixed satellite services. And we need to study coexistence there as well. So in Europe, we've taken the first step is a lower 6 gigahertz band, and then let's see. So we are open, I think, in Europe also to studying what happens in the upper 6 gigahertz band. There, as you may know, there's also an agenda item for the next World Radio Communications Conference, which will look at the upper 6 gigahertz band for 5G. This is agenda item 1.2 on the conference. And there will also be discussions there. So we have, in a way, also an interest from the 5G community for this spectrum. I think we need to study, we need to see what coexistence possibilities are there. And in my view, the studies are needed. The coexistence with the existing services is key. And in my view, the sharing of spectrum will be the key ingredient for getting access to this band. So we have to see where we go from here. But as I said, step by step, ready to open for studies, and then we'll have to see.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Andreas, and thank you, Chris. Just to follow up on this discussion, do you think that there is a way for us to propose the consideration of this possibility of opening up the upper portion for consideration for Wi-Fi? Any suggestions on how to proceed there?
Well, I think that at this stage, the member states, like I said, they first want to make experience with the lower part. So if at this stage right now, I'm not sure there would be any change in the views of the member states, or the majority of the member states, let's say, in going forward for the upper 6 gigahertz band. We first need now to have the equipment introduced. There are still some, like I said, technical conditions which have to be finalized within the CPT. We have to be we have to see that this works basically. And then we may also need to talk about other, let's say, necessary mitigation techniques for the upper 6 gigahertz band. I don't know yet. I mean, in the lower 6 gigahertz band, we've now gotten around, hopefully. I mean, this is still in the final discussions in the member states and CPT around this idea of a country determination capability, which we feel in the European Commission is something that we do not want to see, because it's a very rigid way of saying you can use the Wi-Fi or not, because it's basically on a country basis. Like if in the US you said one state can use it and another state cannot use it. I mean, that's very, very rigid, and we did not want to see that. So we've come to some way of dealing with it through power limits and indoor and so on. But we need to first test that. We need the proof of concept. And if we go then to the higher band at 6 gigahertz, we need to find out, is this is this concept also applicable for that band? Or do we maybe need more in terms of a geolocation functionality that would be able to share with fixed satellite and other users of the band? So there's still a lot of questions there in our view. Let's, at this stage, first test the success and the gain experience with the lower 6 gigahertz band, and then we need to come back and address the upper 6 gigahertz band at a later stage.
All right. Thank you, Andreas. I see that our question queue is really filling up, and the questions are very diverse. So as far as the technical questions on 6 gigahertz in Europe, I would encourage all the participants to join the regulatory group in the Wi-Fi Alliance, where we will have a detailed discussion of this week's decisions from the working group FM. We will review those decisions, and so most of your technical questions will be answered. But since we only have Andreas for 1 hour, I would like to position a few additional questions from the queue, and particularly recognizing that Wi-Fi ecosystem is significantly greater than just the 6 gigahertz mid-band, although 6 gigahertz is critically important for the ecosystem. But let's take a look at another area where Wi-Fi is also Wi-Fi Alliance has introduced a program called Wi-Fi Halo, designed for products on 802.11ah technology, and our certification program is planned for 2021. So this technology and the standard 11ah has been specifically designed for short-range devices in unlicensed spectrum below 1 gigahertz, and it offers longer range, obviously because of the propagation characteristics. Operates at lower power, multi-year battery life and connectivity. So there are all kinds of benefits with that. And so we're certainly grateful for the decisions that have been made to make 8 megahertz of unlicensed spectrum available in Europe for applications such as Wi-Fi Halo for short-range device applications. But this spectrum, these decisions come with significant constraints on power, duty cycle limitations, and other constraints. While other parts of the world, such as Americas, for example, the short-range devices have access to 26 megahertz of spectrum, and that's significantly higher power and no limitation on duty cycle. Given that the Commission has long recognized the importance of short-range devices below 1 gigahertz to support a variety of applications such as Internet of Things and RFID and many others, are there plans to reconsider availability and access of unlicensed spectrum below 1 gigahertz to comport with the Commission's priorities?
Thanks for that question. And you address a frequency band, which is really one where it was very, very difficult in the discussions that we've had on this with the member states to try to find a way forward that could really get 27 member states behind a proposal. I have to say that from the outset. So why was this so difficult? Well, first of all, this is very close to the GSM band in Europe. And we have, of course, the GSM 900 frequencies, which are above these frequencies that you've just mentioned. And we also have, not only for the public GSM network, but also for the railways, which have a particular GSM R network for railways, that also use certain frequencies in this band. And now, to make life even more complicated, it's also a very interesting band and used for governmental services. So when we addressed this band in, let's say, the discussions that we had among the member states, we really had to square the circle and find a solution which, in a way, squeezed everyone a little bit. So the railway community had to give up some of their, let's say, points that they were looking for. The short-range devices community, and it's, by the way, not only for the 11H, it's a number of other short-range devices as well, which have access to this band. They had to give up and squeeze themselves a little bit. And also the military would have to squeeze a little bit in order to make really things meet here. And I'm well aware that 8 megahertz is not, let's say, that much compared to the 26 gigahertz, which are available in the US. But the decision or the choice was not between 8 or 26 megahertz. It was between 8 and 0 megahertz here in Europe. And so I think, I understand that this is not, let's say, maybe the best outcome for the Wi-Fi community if you compare it with the US. However, it is something that we have made available. And I would also like to mention that in addition to this band that is available for 11AH, there's also another band of short-range devices, namely at 863 to 868 megahertz, which we also have available for wideband data transmission devices with 25 milliwatts and also a bandwidth of up to 600 kilohertz and then also up to 1 megahertz. And I understand that there is also in the update that we're going to do on the other bands, so 874 to 876 and 915 to 921 megahertz, that we're also going to align this in terms of the availability of 600 kilohertz to 100 megahertz, so that the channel size will be also enlarged. So this is something that's being discussed at the moment also in the CPT and part of the 8th update of the short-range devices decision. And so we will also hopefully make that change pending, of course, the outcome of the discussions in the CPT. There's one other thing that I need to mention, that there's a difference between the two bands. So while the one in the normal short-range devices decision, so the lower band 863 to 868 is fully available for use, the upper one which is 917.4 to 919.4, that one is also under the control of a network access point. This was also something that we had to put into the decision in order to ensure that it could be controlled, if necessary, by the member states through a network. So this is just to give you a little bit of flavor of, well, the very difficult discussions that we've had on this in Europe. I cannot, in a way, make hopes that it would be more than 8 megahertz here. But again, as I said in the outset, everyone had to be squeezed so that we could make ends meet. And that's just the unfortunate situation that we are in this specific band here in Europe.
Well, thank you, Andreas. I knew this issue was difficult, but now I really appreciate the complexity of it. So appreciate your answer. We have about 15 minutes left in this session, and I see that there are a number of questions from the audience. So maybe I'll go to a few of these. So the question is, does the EU adoption need to be formalized in an EU directive? Can that be in April 2021, or some more time may be needed for EU Parliament work? Also, do we expect that corresponding ETSI standard will be available in the same time frame? So, Andreas, can you take it on?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, the process that we're going through is a Commission decision. So it's adopted by the Commission. It does not have to go through a co-decision procedure between the Council and the Parliament. That means it's quicker. This is what we have in the context. We call it, internally we call it comitology, meaning that the committee, which is made up of the member states, has to give an opinion. And once it's given its opinion, we don't need to go through this long track of, let's say, a directive that goes to the Parliament and the Council. So yes, that means that in April, we will have a binding Commission decision. No need for an additional directive of any sort, but the Commission decision is binding to the member states, and it will be then, well, we will have to see how long it takes for entry into force, but that's also an issue which we might discuss with the member states. But in any case, that will be the binding measure at that time in April, if everything goes well.
Okay, thanks for that. I don't know, my partners, Chris and Jan, would you like to have any more questions, or should we go to the audience?
Alex, thanks for the opportunity. I think we should take some additional audience questions if there are some that you think are appropriate. I was busy responding to some of those, but I didn't realize it removed them from the queue, and so there might be other perspectives. But I think there are a number of questions that would be interesting from the audience here.
Right, and I see that a number of questions pertain to technical specifications that will be presumably incorporated in the upcoming decision. But these we can discuss offline among the Wi-Fi Alliance members, as I mentioned in the regulatory group.
Alex, there is one that I think is very interesting in terms of process here. So there was a question about, maybe reconsideration of some of the parameters. And the specific question is, could the maximum EIRP be reconsidered in the future in case where there is no issue with 23 dBm EIRP for LPI? So for the benefit of your other viewers here, it's currently expected that the harmonized regulatory requirement, the draft, will be low power indoor access points or devices capable of operating up to 23 dBm EIRP, and very low power portable devices capable of operating up to 14 dBm. And so what I think this question is asking is, assuming that that's the final regulatory requirement and the European Commission harmonized requirement, is there an opportunity to reassess and increase power later? I think that's what this question is getting at, Andreas. So, can a commission decision be reconsidered and expanded on in the future? And I think this question is directly related to the power levels. Thank you.
Yes, the short answer is yes. I'll explain a little bit more, because what we usually do is that we set a decision. And we have had that for several cases, that after several years of applicability, we have reassessed the situation. And we have made what we call amending decisions to the original decision. This can be for several reasons. It can be because we expand the frequency range. It can be because we change the power levels, or it can be to also make other changes. I think the best example is the one on short-range devices, where I mentioned earlier, we have the 8th update of that decision already, but that's also because we have very many categories in that decision, which and we have we're constantly trying, of course, to adapt to the state of the art and also to the additional experience. And I think that in terms of the the two types of usage which are being envisaged now for 6 gigahertz, you mentioned the low power indoor and the very low power devices. Certainly, there will be, I think, a discussion after some experience has been made with this to see whether the conditions were the correct ones or whether there's a need to amend something. And that includes, of course, also the power levels which are put here. We have in the decisions, we have a review clause. So from a legal point of view, we can, if a member state or the Commission sees the need to have a review, it can state that, and we can then again launch the process with the CEPT that we've already referred to earlier, in order to have a review of the decision. So in a nutshell, I think once we have made further experience with this application in the 6 gigahertz band, we can also adapt things as appropriate.
All right. Thanks for that. I see that there are a number of questions on AFC, AFC being the automatic frequency coordination system that was imposed in US for higher power Wi-Fi access points operating outdoors to provide limited outdoor coverage in 6 gigahertz. We know that in Europe, it was decided among the administrations that this application, at least for now, should not be considered. And so Europe is progressing only on low power indoor and very low power devices. But do you think, and how would national regulators be able to implement higher power devices, either using some kind of a light licensing regime or some kind of a coordination system? How would they be able to do it on a national basis, and how would that comport with the European Commission decision?
Well, I mean, in launching the mandate, we were certainly open to some sort of geolocation capability, or the AFC, as it's called in the US. And we went into that discussion with an open mind on that, because we had not fixed what power, let's say, levels or types of applications would be using that band. So I think it was also in discussion with the industry, I understand, that industry did not see at this stage a let's say, an opportunity or a clear way and path for having a geolocation in this band. Otherwise, I think we could have also had another category of higher power services, which then include this type of mitigation technique. So what I want to say is, from a Commission point of view, we're very open to this, because we also see that sharing is something that, and also the use of databases, geolocation databases, is something that we need to work on. And we certainly want to work on it in more detail with the member states. What I would not want from a Commission point of view is that we have different things developing across Europe, because in that sense, we again have a fragmentation. We lose economies of scale. And we also make it very difficult for the industry then to, make one sort of AFC version for, I don't know, one country, one member state, and then another version for another member state, and maybe then 27 different versions for the 27 member states. I mean, that would be something we certainly would not want to see, because we believe this is not conducive to economies of scale and also to the industry. So if we approach this happily, yes, but then in a coordinated way, and that could also be something for the review, let's say, that we were talking about in the question before.
All right. Well, thank you, Andreas. Again, excellent answer. Very helpful. We have about 3 minutes left, so I wanted to take this time to recognize my partners, Chris and Jan. Thank you for helping us with this roundtable, and of course thank Andreas for staying late up into the night. I know it's late where you are, and answering all these questions and being so available to us. I hope we'll have an opportunity to organize this again. I know many questions have been left unanswered because our time is limited, so we can continue this discussion for hours, but we need to be mindful of the time. So with that, unless my partners or Andreas have anything to say, I'll turn it over to Monica.
Yes, thanks, Alex, and thanks to all of you. It has been a really enlightening and insightful conversation. We learned a lot about the details, and these are really important to make sure we understand what's going to happen from a regulatory point of view. This is, at this point in time, it's very timely. So thank you all for contributing to the discussion, and thank to the audience for your participation, for some of you late in the evening, and for all the questions you sent in. Now, you will be able to see the video again if you want to, or send it to other people. It's going to be available in a couple of days. And also, I would like to invite you to join us for the next Sparring Partners. It's going to be on October 29, and it's going to be on automation. So well, thank you so much, and to all of you, and look forward to see you soon. Bye-bye.